Little warning about this. I now do this every time I present on anything that has to do with relationship, emotion, or anything. It just seems fair. You might experience uncomfortable feelings in the course of this discussion. Particularly if you don't think Christians should talk about this in the first place, you're likely to be irritated and angry and resentful as we talk about this. I hope you get over that if that is indeed your situation. But if you have or are struggling with any of these issues, or you love somebody that is struggling with some of these issues, you may have feelings as we go about this. And you may experience a paradigm shift. I mean, we actually may talk about something that alters your perspective on something, and that is a little stressful when you start having that. And I've had that this year. I've had significant change in my perspective as I've been studying this topic. And if you require an organized, well-scripted lecture, you may be triggered because that isn't the way I function. So just be advised as we move forward. So the definition of our terms, youth and sexuality, I just go to the dictionary and I look up descriptions. And so I'm giving you several phrases from the dictionary. And then I'll tell you how I'm using the term. The time of life when one is young, especially the period between childhood and maturity, rather vague. The early period of existence, growth, and development, a young person. Age before employment, age before adulthood. And this one was the closest to it. I was looking at different groups that use the word youth. The African Youth Charter, where youth means every person between the ages of 15 and 35. And for this presentation, youth is birth to mid-30s. That's what I'm calling youth. So we're talking about some pretty significant lifespan here. Birth to mid-30s. A little bit about brains. You need an adult brain. Anybody under 26 in the room? All right. We don't all have adult brains in the room. That's just the way it is, all right? So you need an adult brain to really well organize your thoughts, assess consequences, plan and predict, to have increased impulse control, be able to put things off, have patience, control intense emotions. You have to have an adult brain. And it's an ability to observe that certain behavior is unhealthy, unhelpful, and bad, and change when it's happening is an adult brain function, not a youth brain function. Brains develop bottom to top. You are born with a fully developed brain stem. You can breathe, you can eat, but your cortex is constantly changing, the part of you that learns language and thinks and reasons and solves problems, and it's back to front. And the part of the brain that continues to be wired through all of your life is the cortex, the wrinkly outer part of us. And what we end up thinking a lot about in terms of behavioral management, creative problem solving, is the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain right behind the eyes. It has to be on, developed, and functioning for effective problem solving, effective self-control, and emotional states. Any intense emotional state turns off the prefrontal lobe and begins functioning from emotional centers. Experiences that involve sexual behavior absolutely fit this kind of criterion. All of this, and so another piece that this is new to me. I didn't know this until last week, that there are critical periods of time where the brain kills off little or unused circuitry to make room for new. And so this happens many times. The most obvious periods of time are before some of the greatest growth and development phases. So your pre-adolescent brain is actually wiping part of the slate clean, getting ready for all the wiring that takes place during adolescence. At late adolescence, it's wiping part of the slate clean as you get ready for your final adult wiring. And the behavior and the brain activity during this period of time affects the nature of the wiring until we finally have a hardwired brain at males somewhere between 24 and 28, females between 22 and 26. Now, if that's confusing, let me just make it real simple. There are periods of life where what you are doing affects the next phase of life, what you are experiencing. This has huge implication for trauma and abuse in terms of how a brain is shaped, and the topic that we're talking about, exposure to, experience of sexuality broadly. It has implications for gender identity, for sexual preference, for sexual behaviors, for addictions. Really big deal and related to development and what people are exposed to and what they're thinking and feeling as the brain is developing when we're young. There are so many topics I could talk about. I'm just going to make one statement about homosexual development. It is neither 100% choice If you're in that camp, I'm offending you. It is not 100% choice. It is not 100% biologically determined. If you take what I just told you, and there are some genetic markers that suggest homosexual development, but not 100% of the population. There are no biological DNA, anything markers that declare a person one sexual preference or another. So it seems that the mix of genetic predisposition and life experience at critical periods of development shape a person's long-standing sexual preference and experience. Does that make sense? That's all I'm going to say about that particular topic. We could talk for hours about this, and it is a hot item in the church today, a really hot item for lots of reasons. So the world treats the child brain like an adult brain. And here's just some details on that. Consensual sex is not a crime between 16-year-old minors and adults in many states, but you're still dealing with a child brain. The right to confidentiality in many medical contexts is given at 14. The right to birth control in many states is given at 16. Criminal charges for porn creation can be designated at any age. And that we're going to talk about sexting in a little while. And why did I say this? The content here's why I said it. The content in PG movies, many times adult content. I would rate this talk PG. At the language that I'm using, the way I'm talking about it, the content is adult, but the way my delivery is PG, I think, as we go through this. There are no good pictures, for those of you that were hoping I had some kind of graphic stuff. None of that in this presentation. You can become independent of your family at age 17 under certain circumstances. You can be independent. We grant a lot of independence, a lot of privilege to people who do not have adult brains. You can be drafted, all kinds of things. You can vote, all kinds of things happen before we have an adult brain. That was the youth term. Sexuality. And these are, again, just out of the dictionary. Distinguished by sex, concern with or interest in sexual activity, sexual character or potency. The different numbers mean I've gone to a different definition. Another source, sexual character, possession of the structural functional traits of sex, recognition or emphasis upon sexual matters, involvement in sexual activity in organisms, preparedness for engaging in sexual activity, broad stuff here. And so this is one that I picked out of an organizational website, and I like it. I think this is really good. It's kind of long. I'm going to read it. Read what you can if you have your binoculars. I know it's kind of small. Who we are as men and women. Our sexuality changes and grows throughout our lives. Sexuality includes sexual behaviors, sexual relationships, and intimacy. How we choose to express ourselves as males and females, including the way we talk, dress, and relate to others. Sexual orientation, heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual. Values, beliefs and attitudes as they relate to being male and female. Changes our body goes through, such as stages of puberty, pregnancy, or menopause. Whether and how we choose to have children, the kind of friends we have, the way we feel about the way we look, who we are as a person, and the way we treat others. That's pretty comprehensive. Planned Parenthood. That's where this is from. Just thought I'd tweak some of you with that as we go through. But I thought that was a really great definition of sexuality. When do we become sexual? Before birth. You are sexual at conception. And as soon as a baby's born, what are we claiming? Gender. That's based on sexuality. We are sexual from birth. And so here's what I guess most of you would like. We'd like to see sexual awareness develop at a rate that the developing brain can incorporate into a positive identity, healthy choices, and a Christ-centered life and lifestyle. That's what we would like to see, and it ain't happening. It's not happening, and for a lot of reasons. For many people, I will say for most people, that's not happening. So why am I doing this today? I'm doing this today because events occurred over the last year that jarred my attention and brought me to a place of saying, I need to study this, and if I find there's something to be said, I'm going to say it. And so here we are. I grew up in the 60s, right? I was born in 1955. I grew up during the sexual revolution. I went to high school at the most blatantly sexual period of American history. What people wore is outlawed in public now. I mean, you can't dress the way kids were dressing in the 70s. So I'm not, unaccustomed to being in an environment where there's high sexual, provocative kind of stuff. 1977, I'm a youth director in a church. I've taken my youth through several years of development, all of them walking with the Lord, Christian. One of my leaders says to me, I will never marry. What? My parents have a horrible life. I will never marry. I will probably live with various men throughout my life, but I will never marry. I was shocked. This was my first encounter, and this is a long time ago. It was in 1977 with what is becoming a growing trend, which is distrust of marriage. That was my first exposure back in 1977. 1993, I've been practicing in the field. Porn hits the internet. I start seeing Christian leaders in my office. Testimonies like this. I haven't been tempted to look at stuff since I was 15 years old. Now it's everywhere. My 16-year-old daughter caught me looking at the computer. That's why I'm here today. I need to get some help. With technology goes sexuality in all forms. It's a leading focus in any technological shift. 2002, social networking explodes. Facebook in 2006, the explosion goes wild. And now we have anything and anybody you want to connect to in the world, you can do it in 2 seconds. And you can send a message to anybody in the world in that less than 2 seconds. And that is, now think about the developing brain. Impulse control, making decisions regarding the consequences of our choices. We now have literally a Pandora's box that is just letting stuff out all over the place. Now I use the internet all the time. I prepared using the internet for this presentation, and so it is great stuff. Some of it. 2012, I'm doing counseling with a female Christian leader who is a young woman, and part of her story is engagement in the hookup culture that began in her early 20s, and I was shocked. I mean, I'm not shocked by very much in the counseling office, but I was shocked given the dissonance that I was experiencing, talking to this person, her position, her role, and her past behavior, and how she justified it still at the point at which we were talking about it. Everybody does it. Your generation judges this. I know you're judging me. Your generation judges us this way, but it's what we do. That was what I heard in the counseling office. I've heard that a lot since I've been paying attention and asking questions since that time. So 2013, I'm supervising one of my students, and she talks to me about a Christian leader's 14-year-old daughter who's addicted to porn. That is her client, and really addicted. I mean, like, you know, not going to bed at night, staying up all night, looking up websites. And I scratched my head and said, I wonder how much of this is going on, because I'm not working with young girls much these days. I'm working with adult leaders, so I'm a little getting out of touch. So I said, I wonder how much this is going on. So we pull out my laptop, we look it up. I'm stunned at at everything that I saw in 5 minutes. And that has been part of what spurred me on. Who's doing what, where they're getting the resources, the effect it's having on their lives, and the debate about the value of pornography in the life of young people that is taking place at a very high level. Some arguing that it's good, some arguing that it's bad. It's a very interesting thing to study if you choose to look into this. So I'm having to take in this information and begin fitting it into my worldview and how boys are and how girls are, and it's being shaken now. I used to have this kind of nice category: boys' sexuality is this way, girls' sexuality is this way. So the more I read, I do understand boys' sexuality. Everything I found was consistent with my personal experience, raising 3 sons, all of my work. But female sexuality became a new topic for me to explore, and there isn't much known about it. Females have not been a focus of study in any kind of serious way for decades in terms of the development, the impact on the culture, and that sort of thing. It's very interesting. So we're doing this talk. I'm hoping to increase knowledge, and I'm presenting, I'll tell you when it's my opinion, I'll tell you when it seems to be consensual research, I'll try to make it clear as we go through. I want you to get stirred up. I'm hoping that you get angry at some of the stuff you hear, indignant, and that's a motivating factor. God gave us anger to give us energy and drive so that we do something. You know, anger is a signal that something's wrong and we need to fix it. So I hope that happens. That's part of the warning on that first slide. I want us to get out of denial if that's taking place, out of any kind of state of ignorance, but I do not want us to step into fear, complacency, or helplessness. We are not helpless regarding this matter, although it's a big issue. I'm hoping we, even around table today, we're talking about some real solutions, some things that would make a difference in how we are interacting with young people today. Yesterday, had a discussion with a Christian school board leader, one of our local Christian schools, and he was telling me how hard it is to find good leaders for his school. They were looking at a high administrative position, they're interviewing lots of people, And so he would ask questions like, okay, here's where we're at, here's the history of our school, here's our curriculum, our development, how will you take us to the next level? And what he got from candidate after candidate was, we're going to have more rules, we're going to have better dress code, we're going to cut their hair, we're going to not let them listen to this, we're not going to let them do that. And so he said, after 5 minutes, we're going to the next candidate. And we're getting the same old stuff as to how you influence kids from people that they're trying to put in some of their top position in their school. Suppression does not develop. Suppression does not create. Suppression does not improve. Suppression is just an attempt to contain and to control. Police work is all suppression. That's what police work is. And police work is not what leaders of youth do. I mean, it just isn't what we do. Punishing bad choices does not create good choices. So I was having a discussion with a very good writer, Christian writer, 30-something Christian writer, asking him about this. So what are you guys publishing about this kind of stuff? And he's telling me, he said, well, we just published a thing that was very controversial as we were writing about Christians cohabitating rather than marrying. Tell me about it. Well, I grew up in the purity ring, take a vow thing. We all hate it. We all hate it. Now, this is him talking. This is not my judgment. He said what it did for us was it focused totally on sexuality. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. We learned nothing about how to establish our own values. We knew nothing about how to evaluate relationship. He was embittered as he's telling me this. And he said, we don't want anything to do with that. That concept of purity only as just a little piece of life. That was very interesting to me. So he says it really focused us on sex, is what it really did. Now, I'm saying that not to judge your programs. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just sharing it with you, someone who grew up in it, who is a staunch Christian. I mean, he's an advocate for Christian lifestyle. I mean, he's married and all that kind of stuff, but he's telling me what people are saying. So I went to 4 conferences over the last year, soaked up everything I could soak up, some of the top researchers in the field. I've read professional articles, a couple of books I will mention to you that I think you'll find very interesting. The End of Sex by Donna Freitas. She is considered the nation's leading expert on the hookup culture. It will shock you if you read it, but it will also inform you. She's not a Christian, but I've got a couple points I'm going to share with you. The Compass of Pleasure, I stumbled across in a bookstore. Fascinating. It talks about the neurology of addiction, and it talks about why people get hooked on drugs, alcohol, sex, pain, gambling. A fascinating thing. And I got some really good news out of it because it also talked about some curative stuff I'd never heard of. So a really fascinating book. Again, not a Christian book. These are secular folks. I had a lot of discussions. I've got a group of people that every time I get together, I probably drive them nuts because I press them with questions, what's happening in our world with the single 30-somethings. And I keep getting this same message. They are validating the myths that Donna Freitas writes about in The End of Sex when she talks about the hookup culture. They are believing that everybody is engaging in anonymous sex, high use of pornography, high level of self-stimulation for sexual pleasure, and they're seeing it as normative. And these are Christians. I'm not talking, these are Christians. I watched some TV. I watched some reality TV. Any of you watch reality TV? Pretty sexy stuff. I mean, they have to keep an audience, right? And I watched Girl Code. Any of you watch Girl Code? Any of you know about Girl Code? MTV Girl Code. Very educational. Very educational. I watched some documentaries. I watched a lot of documentaries about the science of sex. Some really good stuff out there. I mean, some quality content in terms of things. And I just look at movie titles. I don't watch any of the movies with titles that I shouldn't watch. But Friends with Benefits is a classic movie title about an anonymous sexual, friends with benefits kind of thing. All right. I don't know how we started getting it. We started getting Glamour and Allure at our house, and I started reading it. Any of you read Glamour magazine? Some of it is really educational. I was stunned at the quality of some of the journalism in those magazines. But they're definitely promoting an agenda, a highly sexualized, highly eroticized agenda that is what you'd expect from those kind of magazines. So my summary judgments that I think are shared by many people, we are living in a different era than the sexual revolution of the 60s. Though my generation grew up with flat-out, wide-open sexuality, it is different. We all agree it's different than what's going on today. The church is becoming culturally less counterculture. We are becoming more same as, less different than. As a group, not necessarily your niche of the woods, but as a group, that's where we're headed. Much of it is not positive. We are raising more narcissism, less capacity for intimate relationship. Self-centeredness, selfishness. The whole Facebook thing is me, 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 me. Click, 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 click. We are raising people with less effective regulation of their own emotion. They rely on external sources for self-control, which will lead to higher addiction. And most of our efforts to improve what's going on are not, there's no traction, largely speaking. In any of your little groups, you may have some wonderful stuff going on, and I'm eager to hear about it, because the overall purview of all the literature that I'm reading is not attractive from an old geezer like me who would like to see people with values like I have, narcissistic as I am, with that kind of hope. So I thought we'd go to the origin of all this mess. I'm going to read to you about sexuality, sin, and the curse, and it's got VanValin annotations as we go through this. First, a question: how old were Adam and Eve? They were able to procreate. They were sexually interested, right? What do you think? At least 11. Okay. That's at least 11, right? We don't know, right? Keep in mind, adult brains are not wired until now. So if Adam and Eve were real beings with the same biology that you and I share, then they were part of a species whose adult brains are not present until 24, 26. Peak of fertility is before adult brains are wired, right? Peak of sexual interest are before adult brains are wired. It's an interesting question. What kind of brains did God place in the Garden of Eden? I think they were young. My personal perspective is they were very young. Let's see. Have I already said all this? I think I've already said all this one. Okay. That's the disorganization part of my presentation. All right. So let's read about Genesis 2, and I think you'll come to the conclusion we're dealing with the same whole thing. What we're dealing with today is not new. We're dealing with some of the same old stuff. So I'm actually going to read this to you. This is chapter 2. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Now the Lord God had planted a garden in the east, in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed. The Lord God made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground, trees that were pleasing to the eye and good for food. In the middle of the garden were the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In the middle. At any point, you were equally distant from these two things, in the middle of the Garden of Eden. The Lord God took the man, put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. He had purpose. He had goal. He had meaningful opportunity. The Lord commanded the man, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the ones in the middle that you see all the time, right in the middle. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat of it, you will certainly die. The Lord said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable, but for Adam no suitable helper was found. So Adam was looking. What was Adam's job? He's naming stuff. Here's a cow. Here's a sheep. Not for me. Not for me. I mean, you know, he's wandering around doing his thing. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs, closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. So the man wakes up from this sleep, sees a woman, and said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. This is for me. 2 arms, 2 legs, walking upright. I like the modifications the Lord has made on this one. This is a good deal, coming my way. That is why a man leaves his father and mother, is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Sexuality expressed in the unity of becoming one flesh, separate from your family. Adam and his wife were both naked. They felt no shame. Innocent intimacy was in the garden. Shamelessness, the ability to enjoy each other, but no shame. Leaving and cleaving, part of God's plan before the fall. One flesh is such a powerful metaphor. It is who we are, husband and wife, and the marriage metaphor is who we are with Christ. Just really powerful, rich stuff. You're going to be hearing me talk about identity. Our identity is affected by becoming one flesh, becoming one of Christ's adopted children. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" Let's rush up to today. Did God really say you couldn't have any boy or girl you want? Did God really say you couldn't fornicate, seduce, coerce, or live together unmarried? Did God really say that? That's what I'm hearing from people. The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat from the tree that is in the middle of the garden. You must not touch it or you will die." Modern update. We may live and love together in marriage, but must abstain from lust, and loving the world or the love of the Father is not in us. 2 John 2, 14 through 16. "You will certainly not die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Or fulfill your lust, and you will be worldly wise, cool, have everything you want, and God will love you anyway." Is that modern theology, maybe? A little bit. When the woman saw the fruit of the tree and was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Notice he waits till is she going to die or not? And then okay, I'll take some, thank you very much. And so here's the deal, you have to deny. They had to be in a state of denying God's existence to do that. They were disconnected from their Creator when they chose to do that. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, they realized they were naked. Welcome to shame. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Let's hide our shame. Now we have secrets. This is the beginning of shame and secret. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. They hid from the Lord among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you?" He answered, "I heard you in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." I've already said this. There had to have been, to even hide, you have to deny who God is, to believe you can hide from God. And he said, "Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" Implying, your knowledge of sin did not come from me. Who are you listening to? Take that into our culture today. Who are we listening to? The man said, "The woman you put here with me, this woman, she gave me some fruit for the tree and I ate it." Right? We rationalize, we justify, and we blame. That's how we keep our bad stuff going. We rationalize, we justify, and we blame. We play the victim. This is the human condition. The Lord said to the woman, "What is this you've done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me and I ate." Same thing. It's going all around. So the Lord God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this," he curses the serpent. "Cursed are you above all livestock. You'll crawl on your belly, you'll eat dust all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head and he will strike his heel." So that's not good for the serpent. This is very important. To the woman he said, "I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband and he will rule you." This is the curse. This is the result of disobedience. You will have someone between you and me. I'm putting the man between you and me. And then to Adam, "Cursed is the ground, painful toil, thorns and thistles, the sweat of the brow you will eat, until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, from dust you are, and dust you return." So for Adam, it was just a tough life. For Eve, it was separation from God. Very, very significant curse for women. They were banished, and I'm just going to jump to the end there. He put a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the tree of life. This is a violent metaphor. This is, I told you to stay away, now you will stay away forever. You will never have the opportunity to come into this environment again. We have problems in our culture. In our Christian culture, we have problems. We don't want our youth marrying. For most of you, if you have children who are marrying age, you don't want them marrying when they are at the peak of fertility. You don't want them marrying young. You don't want them marrying when they're at the peak of sexual drive. You don't want them marrying when they are most bondable and most pliable in terms of identification. And they're most able to form a one-flesh identity. This is a serious problem that we have in our culture, right? And I'm not trying to criticize it. I'm just saying this is the way it is. If I talk to parents with teens, parents, they want their kids to have a certain development and status before they marry. I'm telling you it's a problem. We focus on sexual suppression to try to get people through 15 years of lack of sexual activity. That is a long time. We expect people to go 15 years with no sexual activity. And the main thing we do is tell them, don't do it. That's what we predominantly offer. That's a problem. It is now a problem, hard to be a Christian in a growing church. And So I was talking to a friend from Chicago. I was stunned to learn that they have evolved into, they have a mixed gender young adult thing that they do, and then a bunch of them go to the bar. And I thought, I'm not a prude. I mean, but it struck dissonance here. Why? Because these young people are not going to a bar to extend, I mean, they could go to Starbucks to extend just the social component. They're going to a bar to alter their consciousness, to put themselves in a state to be able to do those things that are incompatible with what they just shared in a group. It really jarred me. And when I gave the feedback, the person telling me this was like, oh, that could be a problem. It was like, hello, what's going on here? So you're going to hear me talk about identity. I believe we are failing to anchor people in their true identity. I think that's a significant failure of myself as a leader in the church and the church in general. I'm going to keep touching on this. Okay, why should a young person want to marry? 51% of households in the last census are not led by married people. The hookup culture is replacing intimacy, and this is the sequence. Sex precedes dating. This is the normative gender involvement. The average age of marriage is getting older, 27 for women, 29 for men. 1960 was 20 and 22. I married at 22. I'm an old guy. I married at 22. And there's one, I read this really well-done review of literature on young people, sex, dating, and marriage, and at the end, he says young people are viewing marriage as the capstone of their adult development, not the cornerstone. I thought that says a lot. The cornerstone is the first stone that's laid. The capstone is the last. So I'm not saying that Becky and I did everything right. We just happened to be growing up in this time. But marrying at 22, our brains were still plastic. We're still developing a sense of identity. And we were poor. We had nothing. We headed out as college students to scrap our way through life. It was good for us. Today's young person wants the car, the house, the job, the bank account, and all of the life experiences they wanted to get through before being nailed down and being married. That's not all bad. But given what we're talking about, you can see the quandary for the Christian single young adult when it comes to dealing with their sexuality. Average first birth is now 30. That is not the height of fertility, and many people are having difficulty with fertility. 58% of births are to unmarried women. These are not teenagers. These are women choosing to have babies at a later period of life. These are just shifts in our culture. But marriage is still a grounding for the culture of family. Cohabitating couples who have children still are more likely to split than married couples. Any marriage that has a kid before marriage is more fragile, less solid. Those are just real things. And you need something. You need what I call glue to remain married through difficult times. Where there's no glue, there is no staying together. So couples that don't have children and hit hard times, they're lacking a significant glue. I mean, I think some people should choose not to have children if they're not going to be good parents, but they're lacking significant glue to help them through. And flat out, marital satisfaction diminishes with children. It just does. So if you're having kids, you're going to experience less sleep, less time for each other. And the good news is one day your kids are gone and you realize, oh, hey, we have all this time and we're still young enough to enjoy life. You know, that's kind of a cool thing. Unless you're grieving the empty nest like my wife is. So, you know, there are two sides to that whole deal. What is driving Christians to cohabitate? Hypocrisy is number one. We talk about how great marriage is. Show me one, they will say. You show me a good marriage. You show me why it's worth all this stuff. And that's a real problem. Christian marriages are no more happy marriages than non-Christian marriages. And so they'll say, so is premarital sex worse than getting divorced? Which is the greater wrong here? That's an interesting question, because that's what they expect. They need to know this. This is something we need to let people know. This is true. A good marriage is good for you. Now their question is, show me a good marriage. And there are some. There are lots of good marriages. And a bad marriage is bad for you, and that's what they're aware of. Women, more than men, get depressed in a bad marriage. And the whole divorce thing is a financial debacle. And in fact, a friend of mine who's a financial planner uses that. He's a Christian guy, works with Christians and non-Christians, works with rich people that can afford to do anything they want, they think. And so he'll say to someone who looks like they're starting to have an affair, and he's saying, well, let me show you what this is going to cost you. I know how much money you've had. Here's the price of your messing around. I hope it's worth it. And it actually causes some people to back off. You know, it is denial, it is Satan's deception that causes us to make choices that are just flat out bad for us. Okay, current trends in culture, technology, and sex, and Christian youth. These are what we're going to hit on here in the next few minutes. So let's talk about porn. I reviewed all the survey stuff I could find. There's some disagreement as to where it starts. It's earlier than most people think. The argument is that it could be as early as 5 that the average child gets exposed to porn. Now, here's how. I don't have any grandchildren yet. My kids are holding out. But we got a little 3-year-old that we hang out with sometimes. And when he was 18 months old, he could pick up his aunt's iPhone, turn it on, flip it open, and go 18 months. And he's looking at pictures, he's playing games, 18 months. Okay, so what if that was Daddy's phone and there was porn on it? He's going to get exposed. You know, they go to Daddy's computer, they turn it on, they go to the TV. Anybody that has premium stations on their TV has what I would call soft porn, and any kid can pick that changer up and watch it at any time. It's on, you know, all prime time, it's on early morning. You know, kids that get out of bed before their parents, they go turn the TV on a Saturday morning. They're going to see whatever they're going to see. It doesn't seem beyond the scope of the imagination that a 5-year-old, though the 5-year-old isn't processing it with the same intellect that a 10-year-old would, the 5-year-old is responding physiologically to what he or she sees at 5 years old. So in my study of porn, it's 50-50 now. It's not a male industry, and the industry is targeting females. I read. Citing, if you want to Google James Dean and just look at the stuff, he is a star in porn, a favorite among women, and he's doing crossover movies that will boost his career. He just made some movie with Lindsay Lohan. I'm sure it's a horrible movie. Nonetheless, this is huge, huge press that this guy's getting. The targeted population, and you actually have a copy. I included a copy of the article about him in your handouts, so you can read an article about him, his statements about pornography, why he's in the industry. It's very, very interesting. Why is porn dangerous? Now, I hope I'm preaching to the choir. I mean, it increases shame, it increases secrecy, it increases secrets. One of my patients once said to me, you can tell the health of a man by the number of secrets that he carries. Interesting concept. If you're a Christian, it's a bifurcation of the soul. You have to pretend that God is not in the room. You have to be like Adam and Eve and the fruit in order to engage in something that you know is not drawing you closer to God. So anything that doesn't draw you closer to God is drawing you away from God. It's very addictive for men and women. I used to say in any public group like this, if you have males in your house, you put filters on all your devices, you don't allow any males to have TV in their bedrooms, wipe out the gender statement now. Everybody needs filters. Everybody should not have, I'm very big on this with people, there should not be media devices in any bedroom, ever, ever. I hope if you have your teen with a TV, you feel guilty and you wonder, oh, maybe I should change this. It's not good. Now, here's the biggest problem, though. Porn solidifies an objectified identity in the developing brain. Now, I'm back to young people. In the young person, sex becomes an objectified thing, not a relationship thing. And porn solidifies this in our sexual identity. We are looking at sex as a thing you do to something, not a shared experience with someone that I love. And this is the normative view of sex. Homemade porn. We now can make it anytime, any place, and share it with anybody in the world. And so we have a new term that's coined that is known all around the world now, used this way, like TV is in different languages, so is sexting used in different languages. It is like, there are certain, the internet, there are certain words you can be speaking Arabic, and this is the word that is becoming nationwide. So I attended a conference last week, listened to Dave Clark, Chardon, Ohio police detective, and his job is to do talks to high schoolers on sexting. It was really interesting. This guy was good, really handsome, 40-year-old guy, sharp, kind of a cool swagger as he's talking about this stuff. And so this next couple slides is right out of his presentation. I thought it was just really well done. And if we have anybody doing that in our community, I'd love to know about it, because this is a good idea to have somebody kind of hip and cool going out and talking about this stuff, not geezers like me. So electronic communication of sexually explicit matter involving a minor, that's what we're targeting here, including photographs, videos, or statements. It can be considered an immoral act to simply talk about what you want to do with somebody in this kind of domain. And so the big thing that's different now than was before was access and time involved from thought to act. So, yeah, when I was young, if you wanted to communicate something to your girlfriend in high school, you had to write a note, and then you had to find a way to get that note to her. It could be picked up by a teacher and read, and if you wrote something that is embarrassing, then everybody laughed at you, and that's the way it goes, right? So contrast that to now, and if your girlfriend was a pen pal, you had to get an envelope, lick it, stamp it, put it in there, mail it, right? Click, gone, right? And this is promoting what this slide is about is problems in society that are promoting this. Society is promoting emotionless casual sex, flat out, all the literature, all the media. We still are saying to men very clearly, you're a better man if you have more sexual conquests. This is clear in all the media. And sex is still male-dominated. Sexting is about male pleasure. Women rationalize doing some things sexually because they feel that they're in control. So there's an actual thrust for equality and equal status by engaging in activity that is still a male-dominated and male-serving capacity. This may be in a later slide. The pursuit of equality is leading young women. This is the current drinking pattern for young women. You drink as much as the man. So if I have a 200-pound date and I'm 105 pounds and we're both drinking 12 beers, who's drunker? I am. I'm little. My body cannot absorb all that stuff. I'm drunker faster. I'm drunken harder. If you establish in your female a drinking pattern like that, it continues into your adult life. Men taper down. This is what the literature is suggesting, that men who binge drink as youth don't necessarily become alcoholic, they taper down. Women who binge drink at youth may not become alcoholic, but when they drink the way they drank when they were adolescents. This is sobering to me. Okay, here's the stats, right? This is the stat sheet. You're probably familiar with most of these. So what this is, 78% of young people between 12 and 17 sexed. This is a pretty big number, right? 61% did it because they felt pressure to do it. 29% do it as an expectation of dating. We're dating, this is expected of me. 50% share the sex they get with other people. So this is true even of dating relationships. Hey, I got a good one to pass on to you. 60 to 65% have sexual intercourse by high school graduation. Now this is Center for Disease Control. This is a big operation, so this is their stats. 33% by 9th grade, according to the American Public Health Association. 77% report no birth control used during intercourse. We're talking lots of people out there. 15% have 4 or more partners, and that's only counting intercourse. They do not use oral sex as a stat when they're talking about sexual activity. So you add the hookup activity, and you have multiple partners taking place in many varieties. So why do kids sext? This is what boys say. They want to make their boyfriend happy. It's about me, the curse. It's about the woman pleasing her man. She wants to show off her body. This is all the same kind of stuff, but this is what guys think. She wants to show off her body. Everybody's doing it, and she wants to hook up. She wants me, so she's doing it for me. Total narcissism. And males use this to coerce. If you love me, you would do this, baby, baby, blah, 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 blah. Why do girls do it? Number one reason, to make him stop asking. Coercion, to make him stop asking. To make herself feel pretty and desirable, and to compete for the affection of another. Well, if I don't do it, he's going to draw his attention to somebody else. You see the curse floating through all this stuff? So this is the detective. He says girls would be happy to go through high school without sex. That's his experience doing what he does, interviewing people. But if I have a boyfriend, all is right with the world. So there's this tension. How do you keep your boyfriend? You have sex. It's the same old stuff that I was told when I was a teenager by youth leaders as to how boys can use and manipulate women, use them for their, so I was taught that when I was young, so that I would be aware of what I'm doing if I choose to do that kind of stuff. Men, I thought this was a cool quote too. Men are looking, that's what that should be. That auto spell check thing, men are looking for any woman to provide one need. Women are looking for one man to provide every need. That still seems to be true. That's what I was taught when I was a kid. That still seems to be true. Dangers of sexting, coercion and control can actually lead to violence. People that coerce and control can escalate to violence. There was a famous case, did you all read about the case in England where the girl killed herself because she said to her boyfriend, please don't send it, please don't send it, and as soon as he did, she killed herself. Hit the world press, big time. And you can get in trouble for this. Virginia Beach newspaper about 6 months ago, there was a 17-year-old male charged with making child porn based on the sexting that he was doing with his girlfriend. That is a big offense. That's a federal offense, doesn't go off your record, and you are now registering yourself as a sexual offender. It has, your neighbors can go and Google you and boop, there you are, you're on the list. It's a big, big deal. Kids need to know this, that there are consequences, big time consequences for this. Again, you have to pretend God exists, and again, it solidifies an objectified identity in the developing brain. This theme keeps coming back, solidifying an objectification in the developing brain. Sex before dating, the hookup culture. The End of Sex is not a Christian book. I've already mentioned this. It's good stuff. Okay, so Frida said the hookup culture is everywhere. And by culture, she means pressure, high expectation to engage in anonymous sex. She says it's everywhere. If your kids are in public school, if your kids are in college, if they're out in the street, with one exception, her research argues, and that is evangelical Christian campuses that ban alcohol. It is not normative, given her research. This book was just published last year, so it's pretty new. Alcohol becomes a big, big deal in the hookup culture as far as a necessary element for it to exist. The hookup culture has specific rules like any culture does. No attachment, no follow-up. You're looking for a stranger to have a sexual encounter with in the hookup culture. And there are myths. Everybody's doing it, everybody's liking it. The second part's not true. There are a lot of people doing it. It's not for many people even pleasurable, but they're doing it. If you look at the debate on the value of both hooking up and porn, you'll be shocked at the people who are endorsing pro stuff. You'll just be shocked. The argument is, it is a necessary social evolution in order for people to experience sexuality until they marry. It's tied to this same thing. What do you do with 15 years of your life? So you have from not a problem to it is very destructive to the person and psyche. You have these polar perspectives on this particular topic. And a lot of people do experience depression in the midst of this activity. It is true, this is true. High school girls that do not date manifest less depression than high school girls that date. Hookup culture, alcohol is a necessary component. This is consistent in everything I've read, that the hookup culture does not exist outside of an alcohol environment. And that is true of anybody I've talked to as they've revealed this to me. I've already mentioned the female drinking patterns. Anybody initiates, it's an open playing field as to who initiates it, so it's not male dominated in terms of starting it, but who has the most fun in a 5-minute sexual encounter? It's obvious, if you understand female sexuality at all. Unprotected sex is common, it can lead to rape and murder. You're out with a stranger. That's the whole purpose. Disease, and this is no great surprise, orgasm is experienced way more by men than women in the hookup culture. So, some other things that you might not know. Women respond to all porn physiologically, but not psychologically. Women and men are different. Men's sexuality, in terms of sexual response, is on the outside. If a guy's aroused, everybody knows. It's no secret if a guy's aroused. Women are different. The interior structure, there's a lot that goes on that the woman herself is not in tune to in the same way that a man is in tune to his own biology. So research, kind of research I can't imagine doing, where they expose women to all kinds of things, measure all kinds of stuff going on, argues that they respond physiologically to all forms of porn. Heterosexual, homosexual, solo, group, individual. Men respond, if you don't know this, it's an interesting little tidbit, men respond more consistently to lesbian porn. The homophobic nature of many cultures of men make it difficult for them to watch a male in a sexual activity. You look at back when I was a kid, any girly magazine, there's a lot of women in the mix, and that is because that's how men are responding. So this is another interesting tidbit. Vaginal activity promotes bonding. So there was an article that I read, "Your Vagina Thinks Your Boyfriend Is Your Baby" was the title. And so some pretty sophisticated research showing that part of bonding has to do with vaginal activity. Sorry? It was. It was. And the article was promoting the activity. It just was sort of commenting that bonding is affected by, so giving birth, having intercourse promotes bonding. So what does a woman have to turn off to engage in promiscuous sex? I think it has huge ramifications for our culture, where we're headed with this. Casual sex has to have a circuit breaker. Casual sex for women is not natural. It is a learned behavior. It is not the way women are wired. I become more and more convinced of that. I don't believe it's a sexist posture. I don't believe it is even rooted in my Christian faith. I believe it is a result of research that men and women have some inherent differences, and for women to engage in the male-dominated culture and convince themselves it's a good thing, they have to do something to their wiring, alcohol being the most common phenomenon. This is a judgmental statement on my part. As I observe what we teach in the church, if you divide the church culture up into two environments, the permissive culture, everything's kind of okay, we love you anyway, we don't make a big deal out of rules, and the suppressive culture, this is the way it's supposed to be, women get objectified in both environments. Women get blamed for the sexual activity in both environments. It's the same stuff that has been going on forever. I don't see a significant change. And we are pursuing what we think is happiness. That's the interesting glick. You have in your handouts the PERMA scale. I made this up. Pull it out and take a look at it. I'm going to talk to you about happiness briefly as it's being studied by Martin Seligman. Another thing that I've been researching is happiness, as I've been looking at why in the world do people do what they do. I mean, so that's something that you can take. You don't have to do it now, but there are 5 points, and you can rate yourself on these dimensions. I do this every now and then, see how I'm doing. You can go online to AuthenticHappiness.com, take a longer scale, and find out how you rate with people in your community. That's very interesting. I'm in a good place right now. I'm talking to you from a very good place. I'm hitting on all 5 cylinders. My life has not always been that way. And if you live beyond 45, your life has not always been that way either. But if you are able to experience positive emotion, this is PERMA, 5 points. If you're able to experience positive emotion and do so, that's very important to happiness. Some people need help getting their brains to experience happiness. If you take methamphetamine for 30 days straight, every day, you have burned the dopamine receptors in your brain. You cannot feel good. We used to think that was the death toll. You're hooked on methamphetamine. You have to take something to have any kind of semblance of feeling good. You've burned your brain. New research, I got this out of the Compass of Pleasure. New research argues that if you can get somebody to do this, because it's very painful to do, you get them off the methamphetamine, you get them into a safe environment, and you get them to do mindfulness cognitive therapy, doing mindfulness experiences every day, several times a day. In 6 months, they grow new dopamine receptors. This blew my mind. This was like, ooh, this is something. It's miraculous. And so here's another study that I just heard about. This was really done. They got adults to meditate for 12 minutes a day on the goodness of God. 12 minutes a day, meditate. So I've got a client doing this, and so she's doing, taste and see that the Lord is good. That's her, and you do it meditatively. You just simply, calmly, taste and see that the Lord is good. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Within 30 days, all measurement of brain activity that is in a healthy direction moves that direction. Amazing stuff, just great stuff. Now, interestingly enough, if you meditate on anything about God that isn't about His love and goodness, it doesn't happen. So if you meditate on God's judgment, it doesn't happen. You have to meditate on God's love and goodness, and you will heal your brain. This is just outstanding. This is just fantastic stuff. And it's simple. This is cheap healing, inexpensive. Anybody can do it. But people don't because it feels weird. So Engagement of the mind. If you do activities that totally engage your mind, you lose track of time. That moves toward positive happiness. If you have good relationships, if what you do is meaningful, if you have a history of accomplishment and you have expect accomplishments in the future, you're pumping on all 5 cylinders. I have been twice in my life pumping on 1 cylinder. God has been very good to me. There have been times when I was unable to experience positive emotion, could not see meaning. I thought I was done with ministry. I thought God was done with me. I've always had relationships in my life. That has been an anchor that has seen me through my own difficult stuff. So pleasure, this is VanValin. This isn't anybody else. In my opinion, as I look at what is happiness, pleasure is positive emotion and engagement of the mind, but nothing else. And so it's actually detrimental to relationship, meaning, and achievement. All the stuff we're talking about that most of our culture engages in is pleasure-focused, not happiness. And so when I'm teaching my clientele, that's a distinction I make. There's a difference between happiness and pleasure. Happiness is pleasure is part of happiness, but meaningful sexuality is not the biological act. It is the relationship, it is the intimacy, it is this other stuff. So, addiction. We now believe that addiction is formed at a critical period in a person's life. Why does a person become addicted to this thing? Why not that thing? It's because they get exposed to that thing at a time in their life when they're vulnerable and needy, and that thing does the pleasure thing. So, true story, 7-year-old boy in an abusive home. I'm working with a guy who's been having multiple affairs, addicted to everything sexual you can imagine. What's his history? He grew up in an abusive environment. His father hated him, tried to kill him. And at 7 years old, he discovered porn. Bang, instant feel-good, instant immediate gratification, works every time. 100% positive reinforcement in the pleasure zone. It's not hard to see how people get addicted to this sort of thing. Same with alcohol, drugs, sports, religion, all kinds of things. True story, Christian home. Christian home. A boy is in a high moral values, low nurturing, highly critical environment. He discovers the National Geographic. You can use anything. I mean, it could be, Sears catalogs. It could be whatever. And so the 7-year-olds don't even know what they're looking at. That's part of the story. But it does something. They begin responding. They don't even know what it is yet. So what can we do? Let's talk about what we can do. We can work to improve Christian marriage. That's what you're going to come back to all the time. I mean, who sees the kids more than anybody else or should? It's not you. It's not me. In my world, I see a kid once a week for 45 minutes. It's the people that raise this kid. So here's a very important message. Children in today's culture, this is VanValin talking, are not getting enough time, attention, and touch. They are not. The little 3-year-old that we're talking about, I make a point. When he's in my house, he's in my arms a lot. My arms around his shoulder. We're wrestling. We're tickling because I know that the adults in his life are not giving him enough time, attention, and touch. That's healthy. That's healthy. That's important. It's got to be healthy, well-bounded, meaningful. Humans need time, attention, and touch from birth all the way through. So this is a typical scenario. Everybody starts feeling weird about each other when the teens hit puberty. Dads start feeling weird around their daughters, and daughters start feeling weird around their dads. And we need to figure out how to help parents continue appropriate time, attention, and touch so that they are less vulnerable to the drawing of what's taking place out there. So that's one point. The other point is we have to eliminate ignorance and denial. And we have to address the myths. Everybody's doing it, everybody's loving it. No, not so. Everybody's not loving it. It's not, why are they drinking? Why is bar time? Let's go have fun, let's get plastered. Why? Because what we're doing ain't fun by itself. It's not fun. And there is a lack of teaching on love in the church. The Greeks have wonderful terms, agape, eros, phileo, storge. It helps me as a therapist define appropriately bounded love and behavior. There's not enough teaching on these distinctions and what it means to be in loving relationships, in my opinion. These are all my opinions. I'm on my soapbox. This is really radical. Should we be promoting, and I'm not saying we should, I'm asking the question literally, should we be encouraging bonding when the brain is still plastic, when fertility is still the highest? And a friend of mine, Don Joy, would say, yes, we should. He wrote the book Bonding. Don Joy had the single most requested audio tape ever from Focus on the Family in his interview with inherent differences between males and females. And his opinion is, yes, we should be promoting bonding in young adults, and we have to mentor them for 10 years. That's the caveat. Not, here you're married, you're out of here. That's not helpful. That creates all kinds of mess. But he has a strong argument that we should be promoting people coming together, marrying young, and then mentoring them for 10 years. For parents, love your spouse. Number one thing you can do to help improve the situation. Then love your children, time, attention, and touch. I think we still cut kids loose too soon. I think they need our supervision until they're 24, 25, 26. I just do. I think we need to be honest, which is something most people don't understand. Well, that's a whole other hour discussion. We need to talk about stuff that we feel uncomfortable talking about. We need to be aware of what they're watching. These are the topics on Girl Code. Girl Code, you should watch this. It's rated TV 14, so it's recommended for people 14 and up. And you will hear a bunch of female comedians talking about their lives, telling stories of what they value and how cool their lives are now that they're rich, famous, and can do whatever they want. Hooking up, sluts, friends with benefits, in the morning after. Typical segments on Girl Code. It's Girl Code. It's not Woman Code. It's Girl Code. They're talking to 12-year-olds. They're talking to 10-year-olds. Very sobering to me. Maybe I'm just a geezer, but I mean, it's sobering to me. Parents can put on filters, monitors. They're free. I did a Google this morning. There is really good stuff for free. Download it to their iPhone. Download it to the tablet. Download it to the TV. Set up boundaries. Model real life. Don't be talking about how marriage is great if yours stinks and they see it. Talk about tough times. Talk about dealing with suffering. Talk about the benefit of hanging in there when things get tough. Teach values over rules. Now, here's the deal. Most parents don't have deeply satisfying sexuality, so they can't teach it. It's a top-down kind of issue. But here's the thing that goes through the whole church. A theology of suffering, the capacity to embrace pain and suffering, to value it, to accept the wisdom that comes from it, and to teach children. We placate our children. We give them a video game and say, go entertain yourself. Addicting, just flat out stimulation, brain stuff going on like crazy. So our children are used to distracting themselves from pain. There's a real discipline, there's a real traditional spiritual practice of walking through pain. This is true also. If your child knows his story, his or her own story, they're going to do better in everything. Just knowing where you came from, knowing your roots, knowing your family history, knowing this stuff, which means you're in a culture that's probably valuing relationship very high that you're telling this stuff. That's huge. We can do that. The church needs to focus on 8 to 10-year-olds. They need to focus on that first period of time. I've not found anything for 8 to 10-year-olds. Nothing for 8 to 10-year-olds. Sammy, does this program address preteen, do you know, or is it mostly teen? The program at Greenbrier in October, is that going to be for mainly teens? I'm guessing it is. Mostly teenagers?
There's components on Friday night is parents of teens all the way down to birth.
Oh, young kids too, good.
Yeah, and then on Saturday there's a youth component, which is 6th grade through 12th grade, and the parent component, which is parents of the.
So it just so happens that Greenbrier Church in October is bringing in experts to teach parents how to talk to their kids about sexuality, awesome, and to take teens through a program about appropriate sexual identity, boundaries, and that kind of stuff. Awesome stuff. I asked Sammy to actually bring flyers so you could see who's doing this stuff and why. And if you're okay with the boundaries, you might want to send some kids, take some kids to this event, sample it. Is it something we need to expand in our community? I don't know anything about the authors of this. I just saw the topic and I said, yes, this looks like good stuff for our people. So the whole identity thing, I don't know what the solution is to how to help children ground themselves in their true identity. But this bifurcation of the soul, this splitting that takes place, is a problem in our culture, as it has been forever. I don't have real solutions, but we need to figure it out. In my opinion, we need to teach more classic spiritual disciplines to people. That meditating on the goodness of God, simple healing the brain thing, that's as old as humanity. To be contemplative, to be focused on just observing and describing something, and passive, and let your mind heal a bit. I've already talked about that. A little commercial. We're training marriage mentors. We're training people to come alongside couples and help them grow and develop. It's not a new idea, but we're doing it pretty intensively. We're training people to come alongside distressed couples, newlywed couples, and this kind of stuff. If that interests you, let me know. We've got 20 couples that we're training right now to work in their various churches in this dimension. We need to teach positive parenting that most of us don't understand, and I was horrible at it all of my time that I was parenting. I'm going to be a good granddad when the time comes. I'm going to be a really good granddad. So instead of saying, stop that, don't do that, a positive approach is, when you're dealing with a little kid and you need to stop their behavior, I need you to put your bottom in the chair and sit still right now. It's a positive directive that they can do right now. They don't have to process the negativity when you give instructions like that. You're teaching your child how to cook. Oh, don't do that, you'll burn the beans. The brain has to process this negativity and deal with it. So I've learned that if you turn the temperature down at this point in the cooking, the beans get a nice, even brownness. Calm, directive kind of thing. I'm horrible at it. I have to practice this. I mean, I'm good at it in the counseling room, but in day-to-day life, I'm impulsive and say things I shouldn't say, and I'm a normal kind of human being. But it can be developed, it can be trained so that children are raised in a more positive environment while we're disciplining, while we're directing, while we're teaching. It's simple stuff, but it's actually hard to keep track of. So this kind of stuff, I think, is self-evident. So, theology of liberation of women. We have the curse. Mary, the mother of Christ, declared her liberation when she said, "My soul magnifies the Lord." There's no man between me and God. Christ liberates all of us, men and women, and puts us in a position where we don't have to have anybody standing between us and God. The church, in my opinion, in many places still teaches that man stands between a woman and God, in perhaps subtle ways, but it's still a very, very clear evidence. And you don't have to be a feminist to be a libertarian when it comes to what I'm talking about. A person's identity grounded in Christ, not in another human being. That's idolatry. And the church promotes this in many, many ways, in my opinion. Our next Lunch and Learn is likely to be January. One of the themes that we're kicking around is women in ministry, hearing from a panel of women in ministry about some of the joys and pitfalls and stuff like that. That's one of the topics we're thinking of proceeding with. So, God bless you all. Have a great day. This is just pure fun for me to do this, so I appreciate the privilege of doing this. Pastor Bubba feeds us when we come here, so he provides the church and the food. That's his ministry, so we thank him for that as well. What do you have, Chris? The evaluation is out. Yeah, we mentioned that. God bless.